A billionaire's daughter points at a homeless boy and declares him her future husband. But when her father discovers the child's mother once saved his life, then lost everything because of him, guilt drives an impossible rescue. Can two broken souls from opposite worlds heal each other when the past threatens to destroy them both? Before this story begins, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching from? The rain hammered against the windows of the black Mercedes as it crawled through downtown Seattle's evening traffic. Inside, Jonathan Harrison loosened his Armani tie and rubbed his temples, the weight of another 14-hour workday pressing against his skull. His company, Harrison Technologies, had just closed a $2 billion merger, yet he felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just the hollow echo of success in an empty penthouse he'd returned to alone. "Daddy, look!" 7-year-old Claire pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. "That boy is eating in the rain." Jonathan barely glanced up from his phone. "Claire, we've talked about this. Don't stare at—" His words died as he followed his daughter's pointing finger. On the corner of 5th and Pike, a small figure sat hunched against a brick wall. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old, dressed in clothes 3 sizes too big, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the downpour. In his tiny hands, he clutched a styrofoam container, shoveling cold noodles into his mouth with desperate hunger. Behind him, a transparent garbage bag bulged with collected cans and bottles, his day's worth of scavenging. "Daddy, stop the car!" Claire's voice cut through Jonathan's chest like glass. Before he could respond, she had unbuckled her seatbelt and was reaching for the door handle. "Claire, no!" Jonathan caught her wrist. "We can't just— Daddy, I'm going to marry him." Claire's green eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made Jonathan's blood run cold. Those weren't the playful words of a child. They carried the same weight his own voice had held 23 years ago when, at 7 years old, he'd pointed to a photograph of Victoria Ashford and announced to his father that she would be his wife. The Harrison family tradition. A bloodline of arranged marriages disguised as childhood intuition. For 3 generations, Harrison children had chosen their future spouses before age 10, binding families, securing legacies, ensuring that wealth married wealth, power married power. Jonathan himself had been married to Victoria for 15 years, a cold, strategic union that had produced Claire and little else beyond bitter silence and separate bedrooms. "Claire!" Jonathan's voice softened, but his daughter's gaze never wavered from the boy outside. "You chose Mommy when you were my age, didn't you, Daddy? Grandpa told me." You pointed to her picture and said, "That's my wife." I'm pointing to him, "That's my husband." The child's logic was irrefutable, and it terrified him. Jonathan looked back at the boy, really looked this time. Despite the grime and the oversized donated clothes, there was something in the child's face, a determination as he ate, a carefulness in how he positioned his bag of recyclables to keep them dry. This wasn't a boy who had given up. This was a survivor. "Please, Daddy, at least let me give him my umbrella. It's raining so hard." Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest. When had he become the kind of man who could watch a 6-year-old eat garbage in the rain and feel nothing? He signaled his driver to pull over. 5 minutes, he said quietly, "and stay close to me." Claire erupted from the car before it fully stopped, her patent leather shoes splashing through puddles. She clutched her pink umbrella, the expensive one with white lace trim that Victoria had purchased from some boutique in Paris. Jonathan followed, his $1,000 suit immediately soaked through. "Hi!" Claire's voice was bright despite the rain. "What's your name?" The boy looked up, startled. His eyes were enormous in his thin face, deep brown, ringed with exhaustion that no child should know. For a moment he seemed ready to bolt. Then something in Claire's open smile made him relax, just slightly. "Tommy," he whispered, so quiet Jonathan could barely hear over the rain. "I'm Claire. This is my daddy. He's very rich, so he can help you." She said it with the casual innocence of someone who had never known poverty, never understood that wealth could be a barrier as much as a bridge. "Claire," Jonathan warned, but his daughter had already thrust her umbrella toward Tommy. "Here, you need this more than me." Tommy stared at the umbrella like it was made of gold. Slowly, his small hand reached out, then pulled back. I can't. It's too nice. My daddy will buy me another one. He has lots of money." Claire pushed the umbrella into Tommy's hands. "There, now you won't get so wet." Jonathan felt his heart hammering. There was something wrong here, something beyond a child living on the streets. That level of poverty existed in Seattle, yes, but usually there were systems, shelters, services. Why was this boy alone? Where was his family? "Tommy!" Jonathan knelt down, ignoring the filthy sidewalk soaking through his pants. "Where's your mother? Your father?" The boy's face shuttered immediately. "Mum's working. She told me to wait here." It was a lie. Jonathan had negotiated billion-dollar deals by reading micro-expressions. He knew dishonesty when he saw it. But beneath the lie was terror, the fear of a child who'd been taught that telling the truth to strangers meant danger. "Working where?" Jonathan kept his voice gentle. "Just working." Tommy's hands tightened on the umbrella handle. "She'll be back soon." Another lie. And suddenly Jonathan saw it, the defensive hunch of the boy's shoulders, the way his eyes darted to escape routes, the practiced nature of his dishonesty. This child had been surviving alone for more than just tonight. "Tommy, has your mother been gone for more than one day?" The boy's silence was answer enough. His lower lip trembled, and for just a second the 6-year-old behind the survivor's mask showed through. She said she just had to go away for a little while, to fix things. She told me to be brave and collect bottles, and she'd come back when everything was better. Jonathan's stomach turned to ice. "When did she leave?" 11 days ago. Tommy's voice cracked. "But she left me money. And I know where the shelter serves breakfast, and I'm really good at finding bottles, see?" He gestured to his bag with heartbreaking pride. "I got 43 today. That's $7.80. 11 days. This child had been surviving alone for 11 days. Jonathan's hands began to shake with barely contained rage. Not at the boy, but at whatever circumstances had led to this moment. "Mr. Harrison, we should call social services." His driver, Marcus, spoke quietly from behind them. "This is a matter for Child Protective Services." "No!" Tommy scrambled backward, his eyes going wild with panic. "No, please! They'll put me in a bad place. Mom said never let them take me. She's coming back. She promised." Claire moved without thinking, wrapping her small arms around Tommy's trembling shoulders. "Daddy won't let anyone hurt you. Right, Daddy?" Jonathan found himself nodding, though his mind was racing through protocols, legal implications, the right course of action. Everything in him said to call CPS immediately. This was their job. Their expertise, but the terror in Tommy's eyes, the way he clutched that garbage bag, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "No social services," Jonathan heard himself say. "Not yet. Tommy, can you tell me your mother's full name?" The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Victoria Chen." The world stopped. Victoria Chen. The name hit Jonathan like a bullet to the chest. His vision blurred. His lungs forgot how to breathe. It couldn't be. It couldn't possibly be. But even as his mind rejected it, his eyes traced the boy's features with new understanding. The shape of his jaw, the set of his eyes, the determined tilt of his chin, even in defeat. He'd seen those features before, years ago, in a woman who had saved his life and disappeared before he could thank her properly. "Victoria Chen," Jonathan repeated slowly. his voice strange even to his own ears. "Does your mother have a scar? Here?" He touched his own left eyebrow. Tommy's eyes widened. "You know my mom?" Jonathan's knees felt weak. He stood abruptly, pulling out his phone with trembling fingers. He scrolled through old photos, ones he kept buried in a locked folder labeled Archive 2016. There, a single photograph from a charity gala 9 years ago. A woman in an elegant black dress, her smile radiant, a champagne flute raised in toast. Victoria Chen, tech entrepreneur, founder of Innovate Corp. Her company had been valued at $800 million. She'd been everywhere that year. Forbes covers, TED Talks, considered one of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence development. And then nothing. She disappeared from the tech world completely in 2019. Vanished without explanation. "Is this your mother?" Jonathan crouched down again, showing Tommy the phone. The boy's face lit up. "That's her! That's my mom! You do know her!" Then his expression crumpled. "But she doesn't look like that anymore. She looks tired now. Really, really tired. Tommy, I need you to think very carefully. Did your mother tell you where she was going? Did she leave you any papers? Any documents?" The boy bit his lip, clearly wrestling with whether to trust this strange man. Finally, he reached into his oversized jacket and pulled out a plastic baggie. Inside was a key, a folded piece of paper, and a photograph. "She said if she wasn't back in 2 weeks, I should go to the address on this paper, but I don't know how to get there, and I don't want to leave in case she comes back here looking for me." Jonathan's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The address was for a storage unit in Tacoma. And at the bottom, in handwriting he recognized from signed contracts years ago, were 4 words that made his blood run cold. "Keep Tommy safe. Sorry." This wasn't a mother who had abandoned her child. This was a woman who had left him with instructions for survival because she knew she might not return. The question was, why? "Claire, get back in the car," Jonathan said quietly. "Tommy, I need you to come with us. I'm going to find your mother, but first we need to get you somewhere warm and safe." "But what if she comes back here and I'm gone?" Tommy's voice broke. "What if she thinks I left her?" Jonathan felt his throat constrict. "I'll leave a note. Right here on this wall, with my phone number. If she comes back, she'll know exactly where to find you, I promise." For a long moment, Tommy stared at him with those 2 old eyes. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, but I'm taking my bottles. I need to finish my collection." "You can take whatever you want," Jonathan said softly. He lifted the boy into his arms. God, he weighed nothing, just skin and bones and stubborn determination, and carried him to the Mercedes. As Marcus pulled away from the curb, Jonathan looked back at the brick wall where Tommy had been sitting. In his mind, he was already composing the note he'd send someone to post there. But more urgently, he was remembering a night 9 years ago when Victoria Chen had pulled him from a burning car after a deliberate crash meant to kill him. She'd disappeared before the ambulance arrived, before he could get her name, before he could thank her properly. He'd spent months trying to find her, then given up when his father insisted it was time to focus on the arranged marriage to Victoria Ashford. Now, holding her starving son in the back of his limousine, Jonathan understood with crystal clarity he hadn't just failed to thank her. Somehow, some way, his world had destroyed hers. And he was going to find out why, and fix it, even if it cost him everything. Claire leaned against Tommy, sharing her coat. "Don't worry," she whispered. "My daddy always keeps his promises. And remember, we're going to get married someday, so that makes us family. Family takes care of each other." Tommy's response was so quiet, Jonathan almost missed it. "Nobody's ever called me family before." In that moment, with rain streaking down the windows and a 6-year-old orphan in his arms, Jonathan Harrison made a decision that would unravel his entire carefully constructed life. He was going to bring Victoria Chen home. And he was going to make sure Tommy never spent another night alone on the streets, whatever it took, whatever the cost. Some debts could only be paid with everything you had, and Jonathan was finally ready to pay his. The Harrison estate sprawled across 12 acres of prime Seattle real estate, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and steel that regularly appeared in design magazines. Jonathan had purchased it 5 years ago for $38 million, mostly because Victoria Ashford, his wife, had demanded something that made a statement. Tonight, as the Mercedes passed through the security gates, he saw it through Tommy's eyes, an intimidating fortress that screamed wealth and exclusion. Tommy's small hand gripped the door handle, his knuckles white. "This is where you live?" "It's just a house," Claire said dismissively. "You'll get used to it. I did." Jonathan caught the irony in his 7-year-old daughter's words. When had she become so casually accustomed to luxury that a 12-acre estate was just a house? When had he? The moment they pulled into the circular driveway, the front door burst open. Victoria Ashford Harrison descended the marble steps like an ice queen surveying her domain. She was 42, but looked 35, thanks to a team of specialists and a religious devotion to Pilates. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. Her cream-colored cashmere outfit probably cost more than Tommy had seen in his entire life. "Jonathan, you're late." Claire missed her piano lesson, and her tutor has been waiting for 30 minutes for... She stopped abruptly as Jonathan opened the car door and Tommy emerged, still clutching his garbage bag of bottles. "What is that?" "That," Jonathan said carefully, "is Tommy. He'll be staying with us." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "I see. And does that have parents, or did you just decide to collect strays without consulting me?" Jonathan felt Claire stiffen beside him. "Victoria, we need to talk. Inside. Marcus, please help Tommy." "I can carry my own stuff," Tommy interrupted quietly, hefting his bag of recyclables, his chin lifted in defiance despite the fear in his eyes. "I'm not helpless." Victoria's lips pursed. "Of course you're not." Her tone could have frozen vodka. "But you will leave that bag outside. This is a clean home." "No!" Tommy's voice was small but absolute. "These are mine. I collected them. They're worth money." For a moment, Victoria stared at the boy as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Then she turned to Jonathan with an expression that promised a reckoning. "We will talk about this. Now." She spun on her designer heels and stalked back into the house. Jonathan knelt beside Tommy. "Leave the bag with Marcus. He'll keep it safe. I promise." Tommy's jaw worked, fighting between pride and necessity. Finally, he handed the bag to Marcus. "Don't lose them, please." "I wouldn't dream of it, young man," Marcus said solemnly, accepting the bag like it contained treasure. Inside, the house was everything Tommy's world was not. Warm, clean, abundant. 18-foot ceilings soared overhead, original artwork worth millions hung on the walls. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Tommy stood frozen in the entrance, overwhelmed. "Come on," Claire grabbed his hand. "I'll show you the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson makes the best hot chocolate." They disappeared down a hallway, leaving Jonathan to face his wife alone in the study. Victoria shut the door with controlled precision, then turned on him with eyes like blue fire. "What the hell are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that a 6-year-old child was living on the streets for 11 days, and I couldn't leave him there." "So-called Child Protective Services. That's what they're for." Victoria paced like a caged panther. "You can't just bring random children into our home without background checks, without medical screenings, without—" "He's not random," Jonathan cut her off. "His mother is Victoria Chen." The pacing stopped. "Victoria Chen?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. The Victoria Chen who used to be worth nearly $1 billion. The one who lost everything in that embezzlement scandal. She didn't embezzle anything, Jonathan said quietly. She was framed. Victoria's eyes narrowed. And you know this how? Because she saved my life 9 years ago. I was in that car crash. The one the investigators determined wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with the brakes, arranged for that truck to T-bone me at the intersection. Victoria pulled me from the wreckage seconds before it exploded. I never got to thank her properly. She vanished before I could. For the first time since they'd started this conversation, Victoria looked genuinely surprised. You never told me that. Your father advised me to let it go. Said getting involved with someone like her would complicate the merger he was negotiating with Ashford Industries. Jonathan's voice hardened with old resentment. I listened, like I always listened to what was best for business. So this is guilt. Victoria's tone shifted to something colder than anger. Pity. You think rescuing her son makes up for abandoning her 9 years ago. I think leaving a 6-year-old on the streets while I live in $38 million of real estate makes me exactly the kind of monster I swore I'd never become. Jonathan met her eyes. He stays, Victoria. I'll handle all the legal aspects. You don't have to be involved. Don't have to be involved. Victoria's laugh was caustic. Jonathan, we live in the same house. How exactly do I avoid being involved? The same way we've avoided being involved in a real marriage for the past 7 years. You sleep in the East Wing. I sleep in the West Wing. We see each other at breakfast and public events. This doesn't change anything between us. The words landed like a slap. Victoria's face went carefully blank, the expression she always wore when he'd cut too close to the truth. Their marriage had been dead for years, held together only by social obligation, business contracts, and the fact that Claire deserved parents who were at least civil to each other. Fine, Victoria said finally. The boy stays, but he's your responsibility. And Jonathan? She paused at the door. When this inevitably blows up in your face, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. I'm done cleaning up your messes. After she left, Jonathan stood alone in his study, surrounded by awards and photographs documenting a life of achievement that felt increasingly meaningless. On his desk was a photo from his own childhood, 7 years old, pointing at a picture of Victoria Ashford at some society function, his father's hand on his shoulder, guiding him toward a future he'd had no say in choosing. Claire was repeating that cycle, pointing at Tommy as her chosen husband. But unlike Jonathan's childhood selection, Claire had pointed at a boy with nothing. No name, no fortune, no advantage. She'd pointed at someone who needed help. Maybe that was progress. Or maybe it was just another kind of tragedy, binding 2 children to a future neither could understand yet. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus ran the address from the paper. It's a storage unit in Tacoma. Want me to check it out tonight? Jonathan typed back, Tomorrow morning, early, I'm coming with you. Then he scrolled to another number, his head of security, a former FBI agent named Patricia Reeves. I need you to find someone, Victoria Chen. Last known employment, Innovate Corp, collapsed in 2019. Use every resource we have, quietly. The response came within seconds. On it. How much time do I have? Jonathan looked at the closed door, imagining Tommy somewhere in this massive house, probably still overwhelmed. None. Find her tonight, her. He found the children in the kitchen, exactly where Claire had promised. Tommy sat at the marble island, wrapped in one of Claire's spare coats, staring at a mug of hot chocolate like it might disappear if he looked away. Mrs. Patterson, the family's cook, bustled around preparing sandwiches with the fierce protectiveness she usually reserved for Claire. Poor lamb, she muttered, loud enough for Jonathan to hear. Skin and bones. When did he last eat a proper meal? I ate today, Tommy said defensively. I had noodles. Cold noodles from a dumpster don't count, sweetheart. Mrs. Patterson placed a sandwich in front of him. Turkey, cheese, fresh bread. Eat. Then we'll talk about a bath and clean clothes. Tommy picked up the sandwich with trembling hands. Then, before anyone could stop him, he wrapped it in a napkin and tried to shove it in his pocket. Tommy, Jonathan stepped forward carefully. You don't need to save food here. There's plenty. But what if there's not tomorrow? Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. What if you change your mind? I should save some just in case. The logic of trauma. The survival instinct of a child who had learned that nothing was permanent, nothing was guaranteed. Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest again, the same sensation he'd felt watching Tommy eat in the rain. I'm not going to change my mind, Jonathan said gently. You're safe here, for as long as you need. That's what Mum said too. Tommy's eyes were dry, but his voice carried the weight of abandonment. She said she'd be back. She promised. But she's been gone 11 days. What if she's never coming back? What if something bad happened to her? Claire slipped her small hand into Tommy's. My daddy will find her. He always finds solutions to problems. That's what CEOs do. Jonathan wished he had his daughter's confidence. But as he looked at Tommy's haunted eyes, he made a silent vow. He would find Victoria Chen. He would bring her home. And he would discover what had driven a brilliant woman to leave her 6-year-old son on the streets with nothing but a bag of bottles and a key to a storage unit. Whatever secrets that unit held, whatever truth Victoria had been protecting, Jonathan would uncover it, even if it destroyed him. Some debts could only be paid in truth, no matter how painful. And Jonathan Harrison had been running from the truth of his life for far too long. The world, one far removed from boardrooms and mergers. Marcus drove, while Jonathan sat in the passenger seat, the key Tommy had given him burning a hole in his pocket. Behind them, Patricia Reeves followed in a second vehicle, her trained investigator's eyes missing nothing. Unit 247, Marcus announced, pulling up to a row of mid-sized storage units. According to the records, it's been paid through the end of this year. The account is under the name Victoria Chen. Jonathan stepped out into the morning chill. The unit before them was anonymous, identical to hundreds of others. No indication of what secrets it might contain. He inserted the key with hands that trembled slightly, then rolled up the metal door with a screech that echoed through the silent complex. Inside, illuminated by a single hanging bulb, was Victoria Chen's entire life, packed into boxes. Jonathan stepped inside slowly, breathing in the musty smell of cardboard and abandonment. Bankers' boxes lined the walls, each labeled in neat handwriting: financial records, 2016-2019, legal documents, personal photos, Innovate Corp, patents. In one corner sat a child's bed, carefully made, with a small pile of children's books and a worn teddy bear. This wasn't just storage, this had been their home. Victoria and Tommy had been living here. Jesus, Marcus breathed behind him. How long were they here? Patricia was already examining the boxes, her professional demeanor barely concealing her shock. Based on the dates on these rental receipts, at least 4 years, maybe closer to 5. Jonathan felt his stomach turn. While he'd been living in a $38 million estate, Victoria Chen had been raising her son in a storage unit. Start with the financial records, he said, his voice rough. I need to understand what happened to her company. For the next 3 hours, they worked in silence, piecing together a story that grew more disturbing with each document. Innovate Corp had been thriving in 2018, contracts with major tech companies, venture capital pouring in, Victoria's artificial intelligence algorithms considered revolutionary. Then, in early 2019, everything collapsed. An internal audit discovered $12 million missing from company accounts. The money trail led directly to Victoria's personal accounts. The board of directors, led by her business partner James Fletcher, called for her immediate resignation. Criminal charges were filed, the company dissolved, investors lost everything. Victoria Chen went from tech visionary to criminal pariah in a matter of weeks. Except, Jonathan frowned as he compared documents. The timeline didn't make sense. The evidence of embezzlement was too perfect, too neat. Bank transfers that left obvious trails, documents signed by Victoria that authorized the transfers. No attempt to hide or cover up the theft. She was set up, Jonathan said slowly. Look at this. The transfers happened over a 6-week period, all during a time when Victoria was in the hospital. She gave birth to Tommy in January 2019. These transfers are dated between December 2018 and February 2019. Patricia leaned over his shoulder, scanning the documents, and here, her signature authorizing the transfers. But look at the dates. She supposedly signed these while she was in labor or recovering from a C-section. No court would believe she was sitting at her desk, wiring money to offshore accounts while delivering a baby. So why didn't she fight it? Marcus asked. Why did she just disappear? The answer came from a letter tucked inside a folder marked, "For Tommy when he's old enough." Jonathan's hands shook as he unfolded the pages, Victoria's handwriting covering them in a desperate rush. To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or in prison and my son needs help. I didn't steal from my company. My business partner James Fletcher framed me. I have proof, documents, recordings, everything. But Fletcher has connections I can't fight. He's threatened Tommy, said if I go public with what I know, he'll make sure my son disappears into the system, labeled as the child of a criminal, guaranteed a life of foster care and neglect. So I'm making a choice. I'm running, taking Tommy somewhere Fletcher can't find us. Living on nothing, staying invisible. It's not much of a life, but at least my son is with me. At least I can protect him. The evidence is all here. Bank records showing Fletcher's personal accounts receiving the stolen money, emails planning the frame, recordings of him admitting it, everything you need to clear my name. But I'm not asking for that. I'm asking you to protect Tommy. If something happens to me, if I can't come back, make sure he's safe. Make sure Fletcher doesn't find him. That's all I want. That's the only thing that matters anymore. Victoria Chen. Jonathan's vision blurred. He read the letter again, then a third time, each word driving deeper into his chest like a nail. This woman had sacrificed everything, her reputation, her fortune, her entire future, to protect her son, and she'd been doing it alone for years, while he lived in luxury and never once thought about the person who had saved his life. "We need to find her," he said hoarsely. "Patricia, I want every private investigator we have on this. Hospitals, shelters, police reports. If Victoria Chen is alive, we find her. Today." Patricia nodded grimly. "And Fletcher?" Jonathan's jaw hardened. "Send everything we've found to my legal team. I want them building a case before close of business. Fletcher destroyed this woman's life. I'm about to return the favor." By the time they returned to the estate, it was past noon. Jonathan found Tommy in Claire's playroom. The two children surrounded by toys Tommy clearly didn't know how to use. Claire was patiently explaining the rules of some complicated board game, while Tommy listened with intense concentration, as if his life depended on learning it correctly. When he saw Jonathan, the boy jumped up immediately, hope and fear warring in his expression. "Did you find anything about my mom?" Jonathan knelt down, holding the worn teddy bear he'd retrieved from the storage unit. "I found where you and your mom were living. And I found this. Does it belong to you?" Tommy's face crumpled. He grabbed the bear and pressed it to his chest, tears finally spilling over. "Mr. Buttons, Mom made me leave him behind when we ran. She said we could only take what fit in one bag, and I had to choose, and I chose wrong. I should have brought him. You didn't choose wrong," Jonathan interrupted gently. "You chose to survive. That's never wrong. And Tommy, I found something else. Evidence that your mom didn't do what people said she did. She was protecting you from some very bad people. I'm going to make sure those people can't hurt either of you ever again." "But where is she?" Tommy's voice broke. "Why hasn't she come back?" Jonathan didn't have an answer. So he did the only thing he could. He pulled the boy into a hug, letting Tommy cry into his shoulder while Claire wrapped her small arms around both of them. Over Tommy's head, Jonathan saw Mrs. Patterson watching from the doorway, tears streaming down her own face. This wasn't how he'd imagined his week going. This wasn't in any business plan or strategic projection. But as he held this broken child and made promises he didn't know if he could keep, Jonathan felt more purposeful than he had in years. His phone buzzed. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. He gently extracted himself from the children and stepped into the hallway. "Tell me you found her." Patricia's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "St. Michael's Hospital. She checked herself into the ER 4 days ago under a false name, but the facial recognition software caught her. According to the records, a homeless shelter called 911 when she collapsed during a meal service. She was unconscious when the ambulance arrived, couldn't tell them about Tommy, couldn't give them information. By the time she woke up, she'd been admitted under a Jane Doe and was too weak to leave. Jonathan. She has stage 3 cancer, pancreatic. She's been refusing treatment because she has no insurance, no money, and she's terrified that if she uses her real identity, Fletcher will find Tommy. The doctors say without immediate treatment, she has maybe 3 months. With treatment." Patricia paused. "Maybe a year, maybe more. It's not good, Jonathan, but it's not hopeless either." Jonathan felt the world tilt. "I'm on my way. Send me the details. And Patricia, I want a private room, the best oncologist in Seattle, and everything she needs. Bill it to my personal account. And I want security on her room. Nobody gets in without my approval, especially not anyone connected to James Fletcher." He returned to the playroom, where Tommy was showing Claire how to make origami frogs from printer paper, a skill he'd clearly learned during his time living with nothing. "Tommy," Jonathan said carefully, "I found your mom. She's sick, but she's going to be okay. Do you want to see her?" The transformation on Tommy's face was instantaneous. Terror became hope, and hope became desperate need. "She's alive. She's really alive," I thought. I was scared that. "She's alive, and she's going to stay that way. I promise you." Jonathan extended his hand. "Come on, let's go bring your mom home." As they walked toward the car, Claire trailing behind them, Jonathan felt the weight of multiple futures converging on this single moment. The evidence in that storage unit would destroy James Fletcher. The legal battle would be massive, public, brutal. His marriage to Victoria Ashford would probably not survive the scandal. His comfortable, carefully controlled life was about to explode into chaos, and he didn't care. Not even slightly, because somewhere in a hospital room, a woman who had saved his life 9 years ago was dying alone, believing she had failed to protect her son, and Jonathan was going to prove her wrong. He was going to give her back everything she'd lost, her name, her reputation, her son's future. And maybe, just maybe, if he was very lucky and worked very hard, he might earn the right to be part of that future himself. Some debts could only be paid forward, with interest, across years. And Jonathan Harrison was finally ready to start making payments on the life he owed Victoria Chen, the life he'd wasted while she suffered, the life he was going to spend trying to make things right, one promise kept at a time. St. Michael's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and desperation. Jonathan had been in hospitals before. Board meetings for healthcare acquisitions, charity galas in modern wings funded by corporate donations. But he'd never truly experienced one like this. Not as someone who mattered. Not as someone whose world was hanging in the balance of what waited behind a numbered door. Tommy's hand gripped his so tightly it hurt. The boy hadn't spoken since they left the estate, his entire body vibrating with tension. Claire walked on Jonathan's other side, unusually quiet, her child's intuition sensing that this moment was too important for her usual chatter. Room 447. The number was burned into Jonathan's brain from Patricia's text. He paused outside the door, suddenly uncertain. What did you say to someone you'd failed so completely? How did you apologize for 9 years of silence while they lost everything? Is she in there? Tommy's whisper was so small, so fragile. Is my mom really in there? She's really in there, Jonathan confirmed. He knocked softly, then pushed open the door. The woman in the hospital bed bore little resemblance to the vibrant entrepreneur from the photograph. Victoria Chen had always been small, but now she looked nearly translucent, her skin paper-thin over sharp cheekbones. An IV drip fed into her arm. Her dark hair, which had once fallen in glossy waves, was cropped short and streaked with premature grey. But her eyes, those fierce, intelligent eyes, those were the same. They flickered open at the sound of the door, confusion crossing her face as she took in the expensive suit, the well-dressed children, the man she couldn't quite place. Then Tommy broke free from Jonathan's grip and ran. "Mom! Mommy!" Victoria's face transformed. Shock became recognition, recognition became anguish, and anguish became a love so pure it hurt to witness. "Tommy! Oh God, Tommy, what are you? How did you—" Her voice cracked as she tried to sit up, grimacing with pain. Tommy crashed into the bed, sobbing, his small body shaking with the force of 11 days of terror finally released. "I thought you were dead. You said 2 weeks and it's been 11 days and I waited at our spot but you didn't come and I thought you were dead. Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh." Victoria's arms wrapped around him, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to get back to you. I tried so hard. But I got sick, and I couldn't walk, and I didn't know what to do. I was so scared you'd think I abandoned you. I did think that." Tommy pulled back, his face streaked with tears and anger. "I thought you left me. Like everyone leaves." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Jonathan saw her face crumple, saw the guilt that had been eating her alive for 11 days finally find voice. "I would never leave you, never. I promised I'd always come back. I promised." "Then why didn't you?" Tommy's voice rose to a wail. "Why did you leave me alone?" "It was scary and cold and people were mean, and I didn't know if you were coming back, and I tried to be brave like you said, but I couldn't. I know, baby. I know." Victoria pulled him close again, rocking him like she had when he was an infant. "I'm so sorry. Mommy made a mistake. I should have found another way. I should have—" Her eyes finally focused on Jonathan, standing in the doorway with Claire. Recognition dawned slowly, disbelief following close behind. "Jonathan Harrison?" Her voice was barely audible, but it carried the weight of 9 years of history between them. Jonathan stepped forward, his throat tight. "Hello, Victoria. What are you? How did you—" She looked between Jonathan and Tommy, understanding clicking into place with painful slowness. "You found him. On the streets. Oh, God, you found him on the streets." Her face went even paler, shame and horror mixing with the physical pain she was clearly trying to hide. "He was at 5th and Pike," Jonathan said gently, "collecting bottles. He's been staying with me for the past day. Victoria, I know what happened to you. I know about Fletcher, about the frame job, about everything. I found your storage unit. I have all the evidence." Victoria's expression shifted from shock to panic in an instant. "You can't, Jonathan, you can't get involved in this. Fletcher is dangerous. If he finds out Tommy is with you, if he connects the dots, he won't." Jonathan's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I have the best security team money can buy. Tommy is safe, and so are you. I've already had you transferred to a private room with round-the-clock protection. The hospital staff has been instructed not to release any information about your presence here. You can't afford this. I can't afford this. Victoria's voice was raw with exhaustion and something that sounded like defeat. I have no insurance, no money, no way to pay for— I'm paying for it, Jonathan interrupted quietly. All of it. The room, the treatments, whatever you need, it's the least I can do. Victoria's laugh was bitter. The least you can do. Jonathan, you don't owe me anything. What happened 9 years ago, that was just— I was in the right place at the right time. You don't owe me a life debt because I pulled you from a car, don't I? Jonathan moved closer, his voice dropping so the children wouldn't hear. You saved my life, Victoria, and I never even thanked you properly. You disappeared before I could find you, and I let it go. I moved on. I built my empire and lived my comfortable life, and never once thought about what happened to the woman who gave me a second chance. And while I was doing that, you were losing everything, living in a storage unit with your son, dying alone in a hospital because you were too scared to use your real name. So no, this isn't the least I can do. This is the beginning of trying to make up for 9 years of failing to be the man who deserved to be saved in the first place. For a long moment, Victoria just stared at him. Then Tommy stirred in her arms, drawing her attention back to what mattered most. Who's the girl? He asked, his voice still thick with tears. Claire, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until now, stepped forward with her hand extended like a tiny adult. I'm Claire Harrison. I'm 7 years old. I'm going to marry your son when we grow up, so I guess that makes us family. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Chen. The absurdity of the statement, delivered with such earnest seriousness, finally broke through Victoria's emotional armor. She laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. You're going to marry Tommy? It's a family tradition, Claire explained matter-of-factly. Harrison children choose their spouses when they're young. I chose Tommy. He was eating noodles in the rain, and he looked very brave, so I decided he would be a good husband. Don't worry, we're not getting married until we're at least 25. That's what my daddy says is appropriate. Victoria's eyes found Jonathan's again, and this time there was something almost like amusement in them, despite the pain and exhaustion. Your daughter has interesting taste. She has her mother's practicality and none of her prejudice, Jonathan said quietly. She pointed at Tommy and declared her future. I've spent the last 24 hours trying to understand why. I think I'm beginning to figure it out. A doctor knocked and entered before Victoria could respond. An oncologist Jonathan had personally called at 6 this morning, offering enough money to clear his schedule for the day. Doctor. Sarah Martinez was in her 50s, with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen too much death to waste time on false hope. She assessed the room full of people, her gaze lingering on Tommy, then addressed Victoria directly. Ms. Chen, we need to discuss your treatment options. I've reviewed your case with the specialists, Mr. Harrison brought in. The cancer is advanced but not inoperable. We're looking at aggressive chemotherapy, possibly surgery if we can shrink the tumors first. It's going to be difficult, very difficult, but you have a chance. A real chance. The question is, are you willing to fight? Victoria's hand tightened on Tommy's shoulder. What are the odds? Dr. Martinez didn't sugarcoat it. With treatment, 5-year survival rate is approximately 20%. Without treatment, you have 3 months at most, maybe less. 20%. Jonathan saw the calculation happening behind Victoria's eyes. A 1 in 5 chance of watching her son grow up. Of being there when he learned to ride a bike, graduated high school, became whoever he was meant to be, against the certainty of death if she did nothing. What does treatment cost? Victoria asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That's already handled, Jonathan said firmly. You focus on fighting. I'll handle everything else. Jonathan, I can't let you— Yes, you can. He cut her off, not unkindly. Victoria, you saved my life once. Let me return the favor, please." For the first time since entering the room, Victoria's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she pressed her face against Tommy's hair to hide them. When she spoke again, her voice was muffled but determined. "Okay, I'll fight. I'll do whatever it takes." Dr. Martinez nodded with satisfaction. "Good. We start tomorrow morning. First round of chemo. It's going to make you very sick, Miss Chen. You need to prepare yourself for that. And you," she looked at Tommy, "need to understand that your mom is going to get worse before she gets better. She's going to lose her hair. She's going to be tired all the time. She might not be able to play with you like she used to, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It means she's fighting to stay with you. Do you understand?" Tommy nodded solemnly, his small hand finding his mother's. "I understand. I'll help take care of her. I'm very good at taking care of things." The simple statement, delivered with such matter-of-fact confidence, made Jonathan's chest ache. This child had been taking care of himself and his mother for years. He knew hardship in ways Claire would never have to understand, and somehow, impossibly, he hadn't let it destroy the core of goodness inside him. After Dr. Martinez left, Victoria turned to Jonathan with exhaustion written in every line of her face. "Where has Tommy been staying? You said he's with you." "He's at my estate, in a guest room. He's been fed, bathed, given clean clothes. Mrs. Patterson, my cook, has taken him under her wing. He's safe, Victoria. Completely safe." "And your wife?" Victoria's eyes sharpened despite her fatigue. "I remember reading about your marriage. Victoria Ashford. Old money, society connections. How does she feel about you bringing home a homeless child?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "My wife and I have an understanding. She lives her life. I live mine. She won't interfere with Tommy's presence." "Because you're paying for everything," Victoria said quietly. It wasn't a question, including keeping her comfortable enough not to object. The accuracy of the observation stung. "My marriage is complicated. Most marriages built on obligation rather than love tend to be." Victoria's voice was soft but cutting. "I know about the Harrison family traditions, Jonathan. The arranged marriages disguised as childhood intuition. Your daughter just announced her intention to continue the cycle. Are you going to let her?" It was the question Jonathan had been avoiding since Claire's declaration in the rain. "I don't know," he admitted. "The tradition gave me a marriage with no love and a daughter who deserves better, but it also brought Tommy into our lives, into her life. Maybe that's worth something." "Maybe," Victoria echoed, "or maybe it's just another generation doomed to choose obligation over happiness." She shifted in the bed, wincing. "I need you to promise me something, Jonathan. If the treatment doesn't work, if I don't make it—" "You're going to make it," Tommy interrupted fiercely. "You have to." But if I don't," Victoria continued, her eyes locked on Jonathan's, "I need to know Tommy will be taken care of, really taken care of, not put in foster care, not lost in the system. I need to know he'll be safe. Will you promise me that?" The weight of the request settled on Jonathan's shoulders like a physical thing. This wasn't a casual favor. This was a mother entrusting her most precious possession to a man she barely knew, based solely on the fact that he'd once been decent enough to help a child in the rain. "I promise," Jonathan said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "If anything happens to you, which it won't, Tommy will be taken care of. I'll adopt him myself if I have to. He'll never be alone, never." Victoria's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. Thank you." Her eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion finally claiming her. Within seconds, she was asleep, her hand still resting on Tommy's head. Jonathan carefully extracted Tommy from the bed, lifting him into his arms. The boy didn't protest, too emotionally wrung out to resist, Claire took Tommy's hand as they walked back to the car, maintaining that physical connection like she instinctively understood he needed it. In the parking garage, as Marcus opened the car door, Tommy finally spoke. "Mr. Harrison?" "You can call me Jonathan," he said gently. "Jonathan," Tommy repeated, testing the name. "Is my mom really going to be okay? Dr. Martinez said 20%. That means 80% chance she dies, right? I'm only 6, but I'm very good at math." The clinical assessment, delivered in such a small voice, nearly broke Jonathan's heart. 20% is better than 0%. "And your mum is a fighter. She's been fighting for you for years. She's not going to stop now." "But what if she does?" Tommy's voice cracked. "What if she fights and fights and still dies? What happens to me then?" Jonathan knelt down so they were eye to eye. "Then you come live with me and Claire permanently. You become part of our family. Not as a guest, not as a charity case, as our family, do you understand?" Tommy's eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the condition, the inevitable betrayal. Finding none, he asked the question that had clearly been haunting him. "Why are you being so nice to me? Nobody's ever been this nice before. What do you want?" In the cynicism of a 6-year-old who had learned too early that kindness always came with a price. "I don't want anything, Tommy, except to help you and your mom. That's all." "That's not how the world works," Tommy said, with the weary certainty of someone 3 times his age. "Everybody wants something. You just haven't told me yet what it is." Jonathan felt Claire's small hand slip into his. "He wants to be less sad," she said simply, with the brutal honesty only children possessed. "Daddy is very sad all the time. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. He smiles at work and at parties, but when he thinks nobody's looking, he's sad. I think helping you makes him less sad. So maybe that's what he wants, to be less sad." Out of the mouths of babes, Jonathan blinked back unexpected moisture in his eyes. "Maybe Claire's right," he admitted quietly. "Maybe helping you helps me too. Is that okay?" Tommy considered this with grave seriousness. Finally he nodded. "Okay, that's fair. You help us, we help you be less sad. That's a deal I can understand." "Then we have a deal," Jonathan agreed. They shook hands solemnly, sealing a pact that neither of them fully understood yet, but both desperately needed. As the Mercedes pulled away from the hospital, Jonathan looked back at St. Michael's. At the window he knew was Victoria's room. Inside, a woman was preparing to fight for her life. Outside, he was preparing to fight for her chance at survival. And somewhere in between, 2 children, one born to privilege, one born to struggle, were forging a connection that might just save them all. Some families were born, some were built, and some were forged in the fires of desperate necessity and impossible hope. Jonathan was beginning to understand that the best families might be all 3 at once. The next 3 months transformed the Harrison estate from a showcase of wealth into something resembling an actual home. Victoria's first round of chemotherapy hit her like a freight train. Jonathan arranged for her to recover in one of the guest suites, a space larger than the storage unit she'd been living in, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens and a bathroom that made her cry the first time she saw the soaking tub. Tommy moved into the adjoining room, refusing to be more than a few feet from his mother. Claire, demonstrating the adaptability of children, simply absorbed them both into her daily routine as if she'd always had a best friend and his sick mother living down the hall. Jonathan's legal team had moved with predatory efficiency on James Fletcher. The evidence from Victoria's storage unit was damning. Emails outlining the embezzlement scheme, bank records showing the money trail to Fletcher's personal accounts, even recordings of conversations where he'd explicitly discussed framing Victoria. Fletcher's arrest made headlines. "Tech entrepreneur charged with fraud and conspiracy," the Seattle Times proclaimed. "Former business partner destroyed woman's life in elaborate scheme," wrote Forbes. The vindication was swift and public, but it came too late to undo the damage. Innovate Corp's assets had been liquidated years ago. Victoria's reputation could be restored, but her fortune was gone. She'd lost 3 years of her life, and now she was fighting for however many years remained. Victoria took the news of Fletcher's arrest with grim satisfaction from her bed, where she was recovering from her second round of chemo. Her hair had started falling out in clumps, so she'd asked Jonathan to help her shave it completely. He'd done it with trembling hands, bearing witness to another piece of her being stripped away by the disease. "He'll probably cut a deal," Victoria said tiredly, her hand unconsciously moving to her smooth scalp. "Rich men always do. He'll serve a few years in minimum security and come out with money hidden in offshore accounts." "Maybe," Jonathan admitted, "but he won't have his reputation. His company is dissolving. His investors are suing. His wife filed for divorce. He's lost everything that mattered to him. Unlike me, who had already lost everything." Victoria's smile was wry. There's a certain freedom in having nothing left to lose. Fletcher's discovering that now. They were in the sunroom, Victoria's favourite spot in the house, where she could watch Tommy and Claire play in the gardens. The children were building some kind of fort from fallen branches, their laughter drifting through the open windows. Tommy's transformation over 3 months had been remarkable. Regular meals had filled out his too thin frame. Clean clothes and a sense of security had relaxed the defensive hunch of his shoulders. He laughed now, really laughed, something Victoria admitted she hadn't heard in years. "He's happy here," Victoria said softly, following Jonathan's gaze. "I've never been able to give him this. Stability, friends, a childhood that doesn't revolve around survival." "You gave him something more important," Jonathan countered. "You gave him you. Everything else is just extras. Expensive extras." Victoria's gesture encompassed the estate, the gardens, the life Tommy was building. "This isn't sustainable, Jonathan. I know you're wealthy, but supporting us indefinitely is not a burden," Jonathan finished. "Victoria, stop trying to calculate the debt. There is no debt. There's just this." He struggled to articulate what he'd been feeling for 3 months, watching her fight, watching Tommy heal, watching his own daughter become more thoughtful and empathetic. "There's just people helping each other because that's what people should do." Victoria's laugh was soft and sad. "That's not how your world usually works. People like you, people with your kind of money, they don't just help, they invest, they expect returns. What's your return here, Jonathan? What do you get out of bankrupting yourself on my medical bills and playing house with my son?" The question Claire had answered months ago with devastating accuracy. "I get to be less sad," Jonathan said quietly. "Is that enough?" Victoria studied him with those 2 sharp eyes, seeing through layers he'd thought were hidden. "Your marriage is ending, isn't it?" Jonathan should have been surprised by the observation, but he wasn't. Victoria had always been brilliant at reading people. It was one of the things that had made her such a successful entrepreneur. "Victoria, my wife, served me with divorce papers last week. Apparently, adopting a homeless child and moving his dying mother into our guest suite was a bridge too far." Her words. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, and sounded like she meant it. "I know that can't be easy, even if the marriage was." She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Dead?" Jonathan supplied. "It's been dead for years. We were just too invested in the performance to admit it. The divorce is actually a relief, expensive and complicated, but a relief." "What about Claire?" "Claire has more grace about the whole thing than either of her parents. She told Victoria, the other Victoria, that if she couldn't accept Tommy, then she didn't want to live with her anyway." Jonathan's smile was pained. "My 7-year-old daughter has more moral clarity than I've had in my entire adult life." "But children often do," Victoria said. "They haven't learned to compromise their principles for convenience yet." She shifted in her chair, grimacing with the movement. The cancer was aggressive, and even with treatment, Her body was deteriorating. She'd lost 30 pounds. Her skin had taken on a greyish pallor. But her spirit, that fierce, determined spirit, remained intact. "How are you feeling, honestly?" Jonathan asked. Honestly, like death warmed over. Victoria's smile took the edge off the words. "Dr. Martinez says the tumours are shrinking, slowly. The chemo is working, but it's a race between killing the cancer and killing me. Some days, I'm not sure which one is winning." Jonathan's hand found hers without thought, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. "You're winning. You have to be winning. Because Tommy needs me?" Victoria's voice was soft. "Or because you need me to win?" "Both. Neither." The question was too complex for easy answers. "Because the world is better with you in it," Jonathan said finally. "That's reason enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play. After a long moment, Victoria spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something about the night I pulled you from that car." He turned to her, surprised. "You don't have to—" "I do," she interrupted, "because you've built this narrative where I'm some kind of selfless hero who saved your life, and that's not the whole truth." She took a shaky breath. "I knew they were going to kill you." Jonathan went very still. "What?" "The car crash. It wasn't random chance that I was there. I'd been investigating your company for weeks. Innovate Corp needed a major contract to stay afloat, and Harrison Technologies was our target. But when I started digging into your business practices, I found irregularities, suspicious transactions, payments to offshore accounts. I thought you were corrupt. I thought you were one of the bad guys." Jonathan's mind raced, connecting dots he'd never seen before. "You were investigating me." "Yes, and in doing that investigation I uncovered something much worse. A conspiracy within your own company. Your CFO, Michael Brennan. He was embezzling millions, and he'd set you up to take the fall. The car accident was supposed to kill you before you could discover what he'd done." Michael Brennan. Jonathan remembered him vaguely. A quiet man who'd worked for Harrison Technologies for 15 years before abruptly retiring in 2017. He'd left the company 6 months after the car crash, citing health reasons. Brennan tried to have me killed? He and 3 other board members. They'd been siphoning money for years. You were getting too close to finding out, so they arranged an accident. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I found the emails planning it. The payment to the truck driver to run the red light, everything. I debated going to the police, but I had no proof that would stand up in court, just screenshots and suspicions. So I did the only thing I could think of. I followed you that night. I was there when the truck hit you. And I pulled you out because even if you were corrupt, even if you were everything I thought you were, you didn't deserve to die like that." The confession hung in the air between them. Jonathan felt his entire understanding of that night shifting, reforming into something different. "You saved my life to stop a murder, not because of any connection between us." Not at first," Victoria admitted. "But then I saw you, really saw you, unconscious in that car about to burn, and I realized I'd been investigating the wrong person. You weren't the villain in this story. You were just another person trying to do their best in a system that rewarded ruthlessness. So I pulled you out. And then I disappeared because I couldn't explain how I knew about the conspiracy without revealing that I'd been investigating you illegally." Jonathan's laugh was hollow. "So you saved my life, destroyed your career with hacking, and I thanked you by forgetting you existed until I found your son eating garbage in the rain. That's... God, Victoria, that's so much worse than I thought." "Is it?" Victoria's eyes met his. "Or is it just human? We're all doing our best with incomplete information and complicated motives. You're not a villain, Jonathan, and neither am I. We're just people who made the best choices we could with what we knew at the time." Brennan, Jonathan said slowly. He disappeared, took his retirement package, and moved to the Cayman Islands. I never questioned it because I was too busy preparing for my wedding to Victoria Ashford. Too busy being the man my father wanted me to be. He felt sick. He's still out there, living on stolen money. Yes, Victoria confirmed. And you know what? That's okay, because going after him means dragging this all out, means investigations and trials and years of your life consumed by vengeance. Is that really how you want to spend your time? Or do you want to focus on the people right in front of you who need you? Tommy's laughter rang across the garden as Claire taught him how to do cartwheels. Badly. They both kept falling over, dissolving into giggles. "When did you get so wise?" Jonathan asked quietly. "When I realized I might be dying," Victoria said simply. "Facing mortality gives you clarity about what actually matters, and revenge doesn't make the list." She was right, of course. She usually was. Jonathan looked at their joined hands. His large and calloused from occasional yard work he insisted on doing himself, hers thin and marked by IV lines. "I'm falling in love with you," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. "I know the timing is terrible. I know I'm in the middle of a divorce, and you're fighting cancer, and Tommy needs stability, not complications. But I need you to know. In case there's not enough time to say it later." Victoria's breath caught. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared at their intertwined fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. "Don't love me because I'm dying, Jonathan. That's not fair to either of us." "I'm not," he insisted. "I'm loving you because you're brilliant and brave and you've survived things that should have broken you. I'm loving you because you raised an incredible kid under impossible circumstances. I'm loving you because every day you wake up and choose to fight, even when the fight seems hopeless. Your dying has nothing to do with it." "Jonathan, I'm not asking you to love me back," he interrupted gently. "I'm just telling you the truth, because you've been honest with me, and you deserve honesty in return. I love you. Whether you live or die, whether you feel the same or not, I love you, and I'm going to keep loving you for however long we have. Is that okay?" Victoria's tears spilled over. "You impossible man! You're supposed to be this cold, calculating CEO. You're not supposed to—" Her voice broke. "You're not supposed to make me want to live even more than I already do." "Then want it," Jonathan said fiercely. "Want to live, fight for it, because I'm fighting too. I'm fighting for you to see Tommy graduate high school, to watch Claire walk down the aisle someday, probably toward Tommy knowing her. To have years and years of boring, normal, beautiful life. I'm fighting for all of it, so fight with me." Victoria pulled him closer with surprising strength, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "I'm so scared of leaving Tommy alone, of not being enough, of running out of time before I can give him everything he deserves." "You are enough," Jonathan said into her hair. "You've always been enough. Everything else is just extra, just people loving you back for being exactly who you are." They stayed like that until Tommy's voice called from the garden. "Mom, come look! I did a cartwheel!" "A real one." Victoria pulled away, wiping her eyes, her smile genuine despite the tears. "Duty calls. Can't miss the first cartwheel." Jonathan helped her stand, supporting her weight when she wobbled. Together they walked to the garden where their children waited, his and hers, becoming theirs, becoming family through choice rather than blood. As Victoria clapped and praised Tommy's admittedly messy cartwheel, Jonathan felt something settle in his chest. Hope. Real, terrifying, beautiful hope. They might not have forever. They might not even have next year. But they had today. And today, Victoria was alive, Tommy was laughing, Claire was teaching cartwheels, and Jonathan was less sad than he'd been in 20 years. Some victories were small, some were temporary, but they all mattered, every single one. and Jonathan was going to celebrate each moment they won from the darkness, one day at a time. 9 months after Tommy Chen entered Jonathan Harrison's life eating cold noodles in the rain, a different kind of transformation had taken place. The divorce from Victoria Ashford was finalized, expensive but surprisingly amicable once she'd secured her settlement and primary custody of Claire on weekends. Jonathan had bought a smaller house, only 4 acres, much more manageable, where he lived with Tommy and, for the past 6 months, Victoria. They weren't married, weren't even officially together in the way society would recognize. But they were family, bound by something deeper than paperwork or social conventions. Victoria's cancer was in remission. Against 20% odds, the aggressive treatment had worked. The tumors had shrunk, then disappeared. Dr. Martinez called it extraordinary. Victoria called it stubborn. Tommy called it a miracle, and Jonathan was inclined to agree with the 6-year-old's assessment. The little boy had turned 7 in January, celebrating with his first real birthday party, complete with friends from his new school, a ridiculous castle cake Mrs. Patterson had insisted on making, and more presents than he knew what to do with. Watching Tommy's face as he opened gifts, Jonathan had felt his chest ache with happiness, so pure it was almost painful. Today was a different kind of celebration. The official exoneration hearing for Victoria Chen, where a judge would formally clear her name and acknowledge the injustice done to her. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, former colleagues, investors who had lost money when Innovate Corp collapsed. James Fletcher was already in prison, serving 12 years for fraud and conspiracy. His cooperation with prosecutors had revealed an even deeper web of corruption in the tech industry, leading to half a dozen other arrests. Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit Jonathan had bought her, her hair growing back in soft curls she complained about constantly. Tommy sat between Jonathan and Claire in the gallery, his small hand gripping Jonathan's tightly. "Is Mom in trouble?" Tommy whispered as the judge entered. "No, buddy. The opposite. They're saying she never did anything wrong, that everyone who said bad things about her was lying." Oh, Tommy processed this. So people will stop being mean to her now, out of the mouths of babes. Yes, that's exactly what this means. The hearing itself was brief. The prosecutor presented the evidence of Fletcher's fraud, the setup, the systematic destruction of Victoria's life and career. Victoria's own lawyer, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Seattle, paid for by Jonathan, argued passionately for not just exoneration, but compensation for the years stolen from his client. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and sharper wit, listened to everything with careful attention. Then she spoke, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "Ms. Chen, I want to begin by offering something you should have received years ago, an apology. Our justice system failed you catastrophically. We allowed a corrupt individual to weaponize legal processes to destroy your life and livelihood. We believed documents over character, evidence over investigation. In doing so, we participated in a profound injustice." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Jonathan saw her hands tremble on the table. "I am hereby issuing a formal exoneration of all charges against you," the judge continued. "Furthermore, I am ordering the state to provide compensation for wrongful prosecution and reputational damage in the amount of $2.5 million. It's not enough. It could never be enough to restore what was taken from you, but it's a start. Ms. Chen, on behalf of the justice system that failed you, I am truly sorry." The courtroom erupted. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Former colleagues who had shunned Victoria looked at each other uncomfortably, and Victoria herself sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Jonathan wanted to go to her, to hold her, but this was her moment. her vindication. She needed to feel it fully, without anyone else's support. When court was dismissed, Victoria emerged from the plaintiff's table to find Tommy waiting with his arms outstretched. She dropped to her knees. Doctors said she shouldn't do that, her body was still recovering, and pulled him close. "We won, baby. We finally won." "I knew you would," Tommy said simply, with the absolute faith of a 6-year-old who had never doubted his mother's integrity, even when the entire world did. "You always win when you're right." If only life were that simple. But today, in this moment, it was. Victoria Chen had been right, had been vindicated, and was finally free of the shadow that had haunted her for 4 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Jonathan's security team formed a protective barrier, but Victoria surprised everyone by stopping to make a brief statement. "I'm not angry," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I'm not interested in vengeance or blame. I just want to move forward with my son and build the life we deserve. Thank you to Jonathan Harrison for believing in us when no one else did. Thank you to Dr. Martinez for saving my life. Thank you to everyone who stood by us." That's all. Short, dignified, perfectly Victoria. They made it to the car amid a chorus of shouted questions. As Marcus navigated away from the courthouse, Tommy turned to Victoria with a serious expression. "Mom, now that you have money again, does that mean we have to leave Jonathan's house?" Victoria's eyes met Jonathan's over Tommy's head. They'd been dancing around this question for months. What came next? What this family looked like now that crisis wasn't binding them together. "Do you want to stay?" Victoria asked carefully. "Yes." Tommy's response was immediate and emphatic. "I like living there. Claire comes over all the time, and Jonathan is teaching me chess, and Mrs. Patterson makes the best pancakes, and you're happy there, Mum. You smile more." "I do smile more," Victoria admitted softly, her gaze still locked on Jonathan's. "But Tommy, you know Jonathan and I aren't. We're not married. We're not a couple in the traditional sense." "Why not?" Claire piped up from her booster seat. She'd been quietly observing everything with her usual sharp intelligence. "You love each other. That's what matters, right? That's what you're always telling me. Love is what makes a family, not rules or traditions." Victoria's laugh was surprised and genuine, using my own words against me. "Well played, Claire." She has a point," Jonathan said quietly. "We've been living as a family for months now. Tommy calls me Jonathan, but he trusts me like a father. Claire has appointed herself Tommy's big sister. You and I." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We're partners, in parenting, in building this life, in everything that matters. Why are we still pretending that's not significant?" "Because I don't want you to feel obligated," Victoria said, her voice barely audible. "You've already given me so much. I don't want you to think you have to—" "I don't think I have to do anything," Jonathan interrupted. "I want to. There's a difference." "Victoria, I told you 9 months ago that I loved you. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger. Watching you fight, watching you win, watching you be the incredible mother you are, I fall more in love with you every day. The question isn't whether I want this. The question is whether you do." Victoria looked at Tommy, then at Claire, then back at Jonathan. "I'm broken," she said finally. "The cancer might come back. I have scars, trauma, years of survival mode I'm still working through. I'm not the woman I was before all this happened. I don't know if I can be the partner you deserve." "You're exactly the partner I deserve," Jonathan said firmly. "Not in spite of what you've been through, but because of it. You've taught me what real strength looks like, what actually matters in life, how to be brave when everything feels hopeless. You think you're broken? I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. And I want to spend whatever time we have, whether that's 50 years or 5, building a life together. All of us. Together." Tommy clapped his hands. "Does this mean Jonathan can be my dad, like, officially?" The question hung in the air, enormous in its implications. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the kind that came from joy rather than grief. Would you want that baby? Would you want Jonathan to adopt you? Yes! Tommy practically bounced in his seat. And then Claire would officially be my sister. Because she's going to marry me someday anyway, right? That's what she keeps saying. Claire nodded solemnly. In 18 years. When I'm 25 and you're 24, the engagement will be in 10 years when I'm 17 and you're 16. I've already planned everything. The adults exchanged glances, torn between amusement and mild concern at the child's detailed matrimonial timeline. Let's maybe take things one step at a time, Victoria suggested diplomatically. Jonathan adopting Tommy doesn't mean you two are engaged. But it means we're family, Claire insisted. That's the important part, right, Daddy? That's the important part, Jonathan agreed. He reached across the car, taking Victoria's hand. So, what do you say? Should we make this official? Not the marriage thing. We can figure that out later if we want. But the family thing. The we're in this together thing. The no more pretending we're temporary thing. Victoria squeezed his hand, her smile radiant despite the tears. Yes, let's make it official, all of it. She turned to Tommy. How do you feel about Jonathan being your dad? Tommy's response was to launch himself across the seat into Jonathan's lap, wrapping his small arms around his neck. Can I call you Dad? He whispered. I've wanted to for a really long time, but I wasn't sure if I was allowed. Jonathan's vision blurred. He held the 6-year-old who had come into his life collecting bottles and broken his heart open in the best possible way. You can call me Dad. I'd be honored. Dad. Tommy tested the word, then said it again with more confidence. Dad. I have a dad now. Claire leaned over, joining the hug. And I have a brother. A real brother. Not just a future husband. You're weird, Claire, Tommy informed her, but he was grinning. I know, Claire said cheerfully. That's why we're perfect for each other. The car pulled up to the house. Their house, Jonathan realized. Not his house that he was sharing, not a temporary arrangement, their home. Where they would raise these children together, face whatever challenges came next together, build a life that looked nothing like the one he'd planned, but was infinitely better than anything he could have imagined. As they walked inside, Mrs. Patterson was waiting with fresh cookies and the kind of warm smile that came from genuine happiness. She'd been part of this transformation too, her initial skepticism about the arrangement melting into fierce protectiveness of what she called her family. That evening, after the children were asleep, Jonathan and Victoria sat in the garden, watching the sunset. She was curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, comfortable in a way they'd slowly worked toward over months of learning each other. Thank you, Victoria said quietly, for everything, for finding Tommy, for believing me, for fighting when I wanted to give up, for loving us when we had nothing to offer you. You had everything to offer me, Jonathan corrected. You just didn't see it yet. You gave me purpose, family, a reason to be the man I always wanted to be instead of the one I'd become. He kissed the top of her head. I should be thanking you. Then we're even, Victoria decided. Fresh start, clean slate. From here on out, it's just us figuring out life together. Together, Jonathan agreed. I like the sound of that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned pink and gold. Somewhere inside, Tommy laughed at something in his sleep. He did that now. Laughed in his dreams, his nightmares finally giving way to happier visions. Claire was probably still awake, reading by flashlight under her covers, planning future adventures with her brother. This was family, not the one Jonathan had been born into, with its traditions and obligations and arranged marriages. Not the one he'd built from duty and expectation. But the one he'd found in the rain, in a child's desperate hunger, in a woman's impossible courage, the one built from choice and crisis, and the stubborn determination to be better than their circumstances. 7-year-old Claire had been right that day, 9 months ago, pointing at Tommy with absolute certainty. She had chosen her future. But more importantly, she'd chosen love over logic, compassion over comfort, connection over convention. And in doing so, she'd saved them all, not just Tommy, but Jonathan too. Maybe Victoria, maybe all 4 of them together, rescuing each other in turns. The sun dipped below the horizon, Victoria's breathing evened into sleep, and Jonathan Harrison, former workaholic CEO, sat in a garden holding the woman he loved, listening to their children dream, feeling more content than all his billions had ever made him. Some debts were paid forward, with interest, across years. Some were paid in moments like this, quiet, perfect, ordinary. And some debts, Jonathan realized, weren't debts at all. They were gifts, unexpected, undeserved, absolutely necessary gifts that changed everything if you were brave enough to accept them. He'd been given the gift of a second chance, the gift of family, the gift of love that asked nothing except to be returned with equal ferocity. And Jonathan, who had spent his entire life calculating returns on investments, finally understood. The best things in life weren't investments at all. They were leaps of faith, moments of madness. A child pointing at a stranger in the rain and declaring her future. A man stopping his car when every instinct said to keep driving. A woman fighting impossible odds because her son needed her to try. This was what mattered. This was what lasted. Not money or power or social standing, but the family you chose and the love you fought for, and the courage to believe that second chances were possible for anyone brave enough to take them. Jonathan had been given his second chance 9 years ago when Victoria pulled him from that burning car. He'd wasted it, forgotten it, moved on. But life, in its infinite generosity, had given him another one. A little boy in the rain, a woman dying in a hospital, a daughter pointing at the future with absolute certainty. This time, Jonathan wasn't wasting it. This time, he was holding on with both hands and never letting go. Whatever came next, and he knew there would be challenges, complications, difficulties they couldn't predict, they would face it together, as family, as love, as the strange, imperfect, absolutely perfect unit they'd become. The stars came out above the garden. Inside, their children dreamed, and Jonathan Harrison, holding Victoria Chen in his arms, finally understood what it meant to be home. Compartilhar artefatos baixar tudo story, Chapter 01, 03 Documento. MD Story, Chapter 04, 06 Documento. MD Conteúdo do Projeto 4. 5 Unificado inglês criado por você. Adicione PDFs, documentos ou outros textos para usar como referência neste projeto. Conteúdo.